Canon recently announced an almost perfect camera for hybrid shooters. Let's see what makes it great and what it is missing with some possible reasons why. Hey guys, how you doing? Dan here, and it is great to see you all again. So Canon recently announced the R5C, and I've got to say it looks absolutely amazing. And with a couple of added features, it would be even better and even unbeatable, but maybe that's why they weren't added in the first place, but more on that later. The R5C retains the majority of the still specifications from the Canon R5. It's the video side of things where things have massively improved. The C in the title aligns this camera with Canon's cinema lineup of cameras, and it even has the cinema menu system on the camera when it's in video mode. So back in 2020 I wanted to buy myself a new hybrid camera, and there were a couple of key specs which I was looking for, mainly 4K 60 and some sort of IBIS for some handheld shooting. Now this really limited my camera search. There was a couple of Panasonic options I could go with, or there was a couple of new Canon mirrorless options like the R5 and the R6. So at the time I was thinking I would love a camera with all the video specs of the GH5 mixed with the still capabilities of the Canon R5 and the full frame sensor. And I think that's where the R5C comes in. We've got a brilliant stills camera, and we've also got a brilliant video camera now that doesn't overheat. So let's have a quick look at some of the key specs of the R5C, starting with the new video mode. First of all, we can now shoot unlimited 8K 30 and 8K 60 if you plug the camera into an external power source. More on that later. And this is due to the new fan which has been added to the new R5C. My only concern is how loud is the fan going to be? Is it going to disrupt set at all? Is it going to be loud enough to be picked up on mics? I mean, I can't really see that being the case, but it will be interesting to see. It can also capture high frame rates up to 4K at 120, and this is going to be without any sensor crop and also whilst maintaining autofocus. We can also shoot 4K DCI full frame, and we've also got a range of professional recording options, including the MXF wrapper, which is currently used on most video cameras. And gone are the days where we had to install Magic Lantern to activate some sort of RAW on Canon cameras. The Canon R5C can do it. You're going to be able to record internal 8K 60 using Cinema Raw Lite, a RAW recording found on some of Canon's most recent cinema cameras such as the C70. Canon Raw Lite comes in three flavours: high quality, ST which is standard quality, and LT which is light recording. Now all three of them are going to record 12-bit no matter what resolution or frame rate you are using. And we can also do external ProRes RAW at 8K 30 over the HDMI. We've also got some more advanced features seen in Canon's cinema lineup of cameras, including waveform monitoring, false colour and timecode in and out. We've also got free anamorphic settings and even LUT monitoring. You can also shoot 8K HDR in both HLG and PQ, and when you're shooting 4K, the camera's going to be oversampling the full sensor to make sure you get less moire and a better quality image. There's also going to be Canon's dual pixel autofocus system, but not the dual pixel autofocus 2, which I'll come on to in a little bit, but there will be intelligent autofocus tracking for your face, head and eyes. We've also got three ways of recording video on the R5C. We've got the CF Express, we've got the ultra high speed SD cards, and finally we've got recording externally over the HDMI. And you can also record with a proxy whilst recording your main video. Now this is really great because whilst you're working with 8K video, you probably are going to need a proxy file when it comes to editing. And this is great because it's done automatically and you're not going to have to spend extra time doing this when it comes to post-production. We've also got Canon Log 3, which gives you 14 stops of dynamic range at ISO 800. And finally, we've got electronic image stabilization on the R5C. And this is one of the biggest changes coming to the R5, but more on that later on. In terms of stills, everything is pretty much exactly the same as it was on the Canon R5. We've got the same 45 megapixel sensor that can shoot up to 20 FPS electronically and up to 12 FPS mechanically. There's also the dual pixel autofocus system too, but as I mentioned earlier on in the video, this is only in photo mode. In terms of other features on the R5C, we're going to see Canon's new next generation multifunction shoe, which allows you to add optional extras to the camera, such as the Tascam XLR mag phone adapter, which will give you 4-channel digital audio recording. The camera's going to support RF lenses and EF lenses with an adapter, which is great. You can still use your old lenses with the R5C. It was great with the R series as well, with the R6 and 5. And we've also got 5 GHz Wi-Fi, which is a welcome transfer from the R5. The R5C uses a Digic X image processor, and it has 13 marked assignable buttons to allow you to customize how the camera works. It also uses Canon's new LPE6NH batteries along with the old LPE6N batteries, but I'm sure only certain modes will work when the new batteries are in the camera, similar to the shooting modes on the Canon R6. The design of the R5C is exactly what you'd expect if a C70 had a baby with the R5. It's a slightly bigger R5 with an added extension on the rear of the camera to squeeze in a fan. There's also a red video record button that's been added to the top of the camera, and the R5C also retains the LCD screen on the top and the Canon control dial on the back. The power switch on top of the R5C provides the option to start the camera in either photo or video mode, and this will give the user a totally different experience, fine-tuned for the mode that you're in. Photo mode will allow you to use the normal R5 menu system, whereas the video mode will open a cinema camera style menu. This is great, but can you still take stills in video mode, and can you still take video in stills mode? Sometimes it's quite handy to be able to quickly swap between the two. The R5C is 680 grams, slightly heavier than the R5 at 650 grams, but a lot lighter than the C70 at 1190 grams. The camera does still look quite big and bulky for a stills camera, so that will be interesting to see how it feels after a long day of shooting, but hopefully the additional 30 grams won't be too much of an issue. The R5C is expected to be available in March 2022 with a retail price of around $4,499. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the Canon R5C. What are your favourite specs, what are your favourite features, and what do you think is missing from this camera? And if you are liking this video, please remember to like it and subscribe to my channel. That would be absolutely amazing, thank you. We are getting to the stage with cameras now where we have to start asking, do we really need the specs? And I think the R5C is going to be a very versatile camera, and it will be future-proof for a good number of years. And it does open up the possibilities to shoot in 8K and then export in 4K in an ultra-high definition workflow. The problem for Canon is what do you do next? If you make the perfect camera, why would people buy the more expensive one or even the next one which will be released? And I think that might be the reason for some of the missing features that would have been absolutely amazing on the R5C. Let's have a quick look at a couple of those now. The first missing feature is a biggie. There is no inbuilt image stabilisation on the R5C, and it has been removed from the R5. Now I'm not sure if this was so Canon could cripple the camera just a little bit, or more realistically, if it was so they could fit a fan to the back of the camera, which does enhance the camera in many other ways. And I think I'd rather have those enhancements and not having the camera overheat rather than the IBIS. As mentioned earlier in the video, IBIS was a deciding factor for me as I do a lot of run and gun shooting, and I do use a gimbal when the time calls for it, but it is always handy to have the option to go handheld when needed. And as mentioned in the specs earlier in the video, the R5C does have electric stabilisation and of course for optical stabilisation from the lenses as well, so at least it has that. And it will be interesting to see how well this works, especially if paired with Canon's older EF glass. And that's just the video side of things. What about the still side? Now, having the inbuilt stabilisation is really great for images, especially with longer lenses such as a 200 or even the longer one which Canon have recently released, such as a 600mm and 800. Now these have a really high aperture of f11 I think it is, so when you're shooting you do need the inbuilt image stabilisation to keep the shutter speed down, which sometimes isn't really possible, especially if you're shooting indoors. Secondly, the R5C doesn't come with C-Log 2, Canon's log mode which increases dynamic range up to 16 stops. The R6 didn't ship with C-Log 3 and that was added with a firmware update, so this might be the case with the R5C as well. Next along we've got the micro HDMI. I'm going to keep this one fairly short. Canon, please use a full HDMI input. The micro HDMI is one of the worst video connections out there. It breaks, it's flimsy and it's not great, and considering this is a hybrid camera and definitely focused towards the video market, I can't see why a full HDMI isn't included. I'd even take a mini HDMI, but definitely not a micro one. Now this one isn't too much of a big deal for myself, but I've seen people online wanting an internal ND filter on the R5C. I can definitely see it as being a useful feature, especially as you find them on most cinema video cameras. But I have no issues popping an ND filter on front of the lens. Sure, it can be a bit of a pain swapping them over and over, but I don't mind it. Finally, it's the requirement of having an external power source to use the camera to its full potential and shoot 8K RAW 60 FPS. Now again, this isn't a massive problem, especially as it is a hybrid camera, but I can see this being an issue while shooting outdoors or in certain buildings where you don't have access to power. At the end of the day, all cameras do have limitations, and for me the other specs definitely outweigh this one. It also has to be asked, did Canon cripple the R5C with the lack of some of these features? In all honesty, I think there is a small bit of Canon limiting the specs of videographers by the C70, but of course that doesn't suit everyone. And I know for myself and a lot of other videographers, the R5C would be a much more useful camera to have on you at all times. And when you look at the R5C as a hybrid camera, there was always going to be a couple of features missing. When you think about the specs you'd love to see on a perfect hybrid camera, I think you'll find the majority of them are on the R5C. There's no other camera on the market with this amount of useful features for both stills and video. Assuming the camera performs as well as specified, I think Canon really has found a great hybrid balance with the R5C. Even as a run and gun style of hybrid shooter, I still think the Canon R5C is a brilliant camera and it's one I would definitely love to buy. And I can't wait to see what Canon are going to bring out next. But guys, this is the end of the video now, and thank you very much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the R5C down in the comments below. And if you did like this video, please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.